Avem alături de noi pe scenă doi invitați speciali și o să încep cu Olivier Tilkens, președinte Europa de Nord și Centrală, Puratos Group. Olivier are în coordonare aproximativ 30 sau 34 de țări, inclusiv România, și sub coordonarea sa reușim să ducem industria mai departe în România. Iar al doilea invitat este Claire Matthews. Claire Matthews este Senior Innovation Consultant la Science Park, un incubator de startup-uri din Austria, foarte mult pe zona de high-tech, dar inclusiv în zona de food. Gentlemen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And hello, everybody. Good to be with you today. The session will be in English, or Romanian is both very limited, so excuse us for this one. And if you need any support, please ask a headset so that you can follow it up. We took it very safe. We have no slides, no videos, so no technical issues expected. It's just the discussions between the two of us, but it's not only the two of us. We would really like to have an interactive discussions. So really feel free during the sessions, sharing some experience, asking questions. At the moment, we will also ask you some questions, but feel free to raise the hand, asking questions in English, in Romanian, in any other language. We will manage the translation. The session is about two things. One, we will talk about innovations in the food industry. I think it's a very important topic to see how innovations is developing. And we will also link it with startups. So more and more we see startups popping up into the food innovation fields. Many companies are researching on new elements and also discussing what could be the role of startups in those innovations and how can we collaborate with bigger corporations with those startups. And I think we are very lucky to have Craig with us today. And I think maybe Craig, to start, it could be nice if you introduce yourself, explain a bit your background and how you are used to work with startups.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm delighted to actually be here to share some of my thoughts and views with you all. I just have to say that technical things do happen. If you imagine how these things work, literally within the chips you have lots and lots, millions of switches, and an electron has to go in the right place at the right time. And when it doesn't, your video doesn't work. And that's a bit of a problem. So it can be a challenge for us, but actually, let's think about it. An electron made a different choice for itself, so that's okay as well. So from my perspective, I'm obviously coming from the United Kingdom. I grew up in the countryside. I was surrounded by the place where a lot of food is actually, grown and reared. And I came out of that lovely, glorious green environment and went and started pretty much my career. And my career started off in the whole startup space, because I went out with a very critical mind and I looked at the world around me and I said, okay, things need to change. And I came up with an idea for a business and I created one. Many years on, I had the opportunity to come to Austria. And there, I've actually been involved in working in startups to try and change them around to make them successful. I've been a mentor to many different startup founders, because mentorship, I think, is an important aspect that you need to have in a startup. But also, I'm now a senior innovation consultant at one of Austria's oldest high-tech incubators. And when I say high-tech, we're talking about, let's say, high-tech agnostic on one side. So we're looking at bringing in innovation from all different areas, of whatever you can think of, whether or not it's new energy, food, new food technologies, etc. But also we have a particular focus on space and space innovation too, because we work with the European Space Agency's Business Incubation Center, which is one of the biggest networks for business pretty much anywhere in the world. And I know that we'll probably talk a little bit about space also a little bit later on. But what it goes to show is that there's great technology that's been developed in Austria, here in Romania, all over the world, and it has really an opportunity to change the way in which you operate your businesses, to make them potentially more efficient, to make them more sustainable, to improve your product, or to improve the processes that you put forward. So that's what I do, and I've been doing that for the last 7 years, and I'm delighted it's brought me to this stage. This is a highlight for me, so thank you very much. Yeah.
And you can see Greg has a lot of experience with startups, so I think we are going to use this time very usefully. But maybe Greg, a basic question to start. We talk about startups, about incubators. Can you clarify a bit what is what? How should we define it? How is dynamic this environment? How it works? Just to help us to understand the big pictures.
So a startup in the European sense is pretty much defined by a company that is younger than 5 years old. So they're very much at the beginning of their journey. They tend not to have millions in terms of revenues. They tend to be smaller teams as well. And an incubator is kind of a support structure that is put in place in order to support the development over a longer period of time. Our programs run between 18 and 24 months. That seems like a very long time to be working together with startups, but let's face it, high tech is sometimes, it's not always fast, and you need that sustained support over that early phase of their development. You may have heard other terms like accelerators. These tend to be like much shorter programs that come out and you just basically work with the startup for maybe 6 weeks or so in order to help them get over a particular milestone, or to make a move into a market in a much more effective way. And then, of course, if we go beyond those sorts of structures, you also have corporates, and corporates also have their venture vehicles, which are also intended to support the development of companies.
And what are we talking about? If you take the European field, how many startups do we estimate? How dynamic is it? Which are the new entrants? Give us a bit the European view of it.
Oof. I mean, from a European perspective, I think that generally, if you talk to investors are very concerned about the money situation. They would actually argue that it's been pretty tough these last few years. I actually see it a little bit differently. I think that what we're seeing is, like, in terms of investment, and if we take investment as being some sort of indicator for how vibrant the startup world is, it's been trending on the way up. Of course, during COVID, we had massive spikes. You wouldn't think this, but we had massive spikes in investment. And the reason why is because pretty much those investors were putting money back into their startups, trying to prevent them from dying. But after the pandemic, we still see that nice steady increase in terms of investment going into startups. I think it's very dynamic. I think that probably now, looking at the next few years, we're going to start to seeing a lot of things on the application level of AI, using AI. Most of you have heard about ChatGPT. These run on large language models, and there tends to be the big US companies that are developing them, because actually their USP, and the reason why they can do it, is because they have massive computational power, which unfortunately we don't tend to have here in Europe. And when we do, we use it for, forecasting the weather.
Okay. Maybe last questions before we move to the audience. What are the main challenges that startups are facing into their developments? What are the main critical points for them?
I mean, when you're a startup, you're like a newborn baby. You don't really know much about the world. You know a lot about how things work, maybe how your hands work, and so you have that association. So they're developing great technologies, but actually understanding how to work with companies like Paratos is kind of a little bit of a black box. And so getting out there and learning and finding out how you interact and how you engage with your startup with companies, I think that's a challenge, but I also think it's a solvable challenge. And of course, money. Money is always a thing that startups need, because very often it's a passionate founder team, very limited financial resources, but a lot of motivation to actually build something special.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it could be interesting to ask to the audience about their experience about startups. So maybe first of all, we are almost 200 people in the room. Who is working quite actively with startups? Can you raise your hands if you are working actively with startups? See 1 hand, 2 hands.
I like how the Romanians keep it like this, maybe up here.
So it's only 2 people out of 200 working with startups? If you don't mind, can you share a bit how you're doing with startups? Don't know if we have a mic. The mic is coming. Sorry for the delay. Do it in Romanian, yes.
Hello, I am Adelita Pămânescu from Michael Artisan Bakery. We have a bakery. We prepare only breads with sourdough. Pure sourdough, natural, 2 days of fermentation for every piece of bread. And we sell in supermarkets and hypermarkets.
Okay.
We are in that exception.
Okay. And the link with startups, how do you use the startups in your business?
We create our own
All
starters.
startups. Okay, so it's a own creation. There was a second person on the back. I don't know who. Can you also share what are you doing with startups? Is it own creation or something you collaborate with? Andrea.
Hi everyone, my name is Răzvan Keregi. I'm coming from Lionfin. And we are working with all type of companies, startups, small medium companies, and also with corporate clients. From startup clients, from the point of view of the startup clients, we are trying to educate them from the beginning in point of financial education terms, in point of not breaking their neck, if you want to put it that way. And we also work with, as Craig said, with babies of the corporate clients, which are also seen as a startup company from the banks.
Okay.
From the bank's point of view, any new company that I start in a new field, it could be considered as a startup company from the banking point of view. So this is what we do. We'll do a lot of financial education for the clients, not considering their level of business. It's not important the level, it's important the new entry in a new field. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. I think it's 2 nice examples. One is more on the creation part, one is more on the education and the support part, but it's also, we should acknowledge that out of 200 people, almost nobody is really collaborating actively with startups. And I think that's something we would like to talk about it in a few minutes and giving some ideas how to do it. Maybe before we move there, Craig.
Just one question from me.
Oh, sorry, Gabriela, I apologize.
Craig, I would like to ask you something, just some advices from you, because you saw there are not so many people working in startups, like Olivier mentioned. When you are in a country where half of the next generation, the young generation, wants to be hired in big corporation and the other half wants to work for the state, what would be your advice in order to encourage a bit the entrepreneurial spirit through the startups?
I mean, startup education is something that actually is, I think it's really important. I remember when I was at school, even, as I mentioned, even in the humble surroundings of the rolling green hills of Wales, we still had entrepreneurship courses whilst we was at high school. That's a long time ago, okay? And maybe, I don't know what it's like here in Romania, but I think it's important that we go out and we advocate and talk a little bit more about startups. I think that one of the things I think a lot of companies struggle with is understanding, okay, what is the value of working with a startup? Because very often they come with a lot of negative ideas, such as, what if they're not around next year? What if I invest all this time? Can I really trust them because they haven't actually built up a presence? And the thing is that what I would be a strong advocate for is to say, okay, go out there and try to find startups. There's really good reasons why you should. Number one, they're probably fixing a problem that you find hard to fix yourselves. You know, so you can go out there and you can look for solutions in startups. And number two, they're very dynamic. The chances are is that if you work with them, they'll actually work with you back and actually develop something that is really tailored and useful for your business. And so I think that, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but it's about how do you create processes within your organizations that make you open and ready to collaborate. We had this nice discussion before. We was talking a little bit about social media. There was a lady who was talking about, okay, online buying behaviors. I was looking, I was also doing some scrolling during my zombie moments. And there was this great story about how a US cookie company, Crumble Cookies, some guys in Australia basically decided to go onto TikTok and start creating a lot of buzz around a pop-up shop, right? So what they were doing is using social media to create a tremendous amount of anticipation. The guys, and these are very unsustainable cookies, because the guys jumped on an aeroplane, went all the way over to the US, picked up boxes and boxes and boxes of cookies, flew back and created this pop-up shop and started to sell them. And people were spending $15 US on a single cookie. And so, you know, technology is extremely impressive, and actually working with some of these guerrilla tactics is really interesting. And startups are great at using those tactics because they have to. I should also mention that this was not a wing of Crumble Cookies. It was a couple of opportunistic people who actually took that opportunity. Let's hope that they don't get into too much trouble, though.
Maybe to come back to the field of innovation, so
Yeah.
we are all active in the food sector, and most especially in the bakery, confectionery, and chocolate. What is the type of innovations that you see in these sectors, and what is the type of research that those startups are looking at?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think it's quite amazing how startups seem to manifest ideas around some of the trending topics that we were talking about before. You know, when it comes to things such as how do we make the foods that we eat more nutritious? You know, so the use of fermentation. So we have I work with a company who's developing fermented chips, savory chips. And the advantage that they have is that it's 3 ingredients. It increases the bioavailability of proteins and the nutrients in the legumes that they're using. And they're a tasty alternative snack. And actually in this space, it's quite a novel and modern approach. We have more, let's say, larger scale, more scientific or science-driven companies too. So people who are developing massive bioreactors. They found a particular organism that consumes CO2 and produces protein, a protein product, or at least basically they produce protein, and you can then use that, number one, for animal feed and things like that, but you can also think about it for human consumption later on. And they're developing alternative proteins. We have other companies that are developing flavors, so using yeast and yeast factories. So they're able to modify the yeast to produce a particular flavor profile, which is great for, as we saw, the vegan, which is running fast now in terms of trends. It's great if you want to add a meaty flavor to your bread, but still keep it, I don't know if that's a weird concoction that I've just came out with there, but, you know, but still keep it vegan. Or they can produce an almondy flavor. So if you want to put an almond taste into your products, but also at the same time not worry people who have nut allergies. So I think that actually it continues. It's surprising really how much innovation is taking place in food. So for example, we also have sugar. There's a Viennese company that came out of research, and they are using legume substrates to actually produce a sugar that has the same taste profile as sugar. It has the same functionality as sugar. In other words, you can put it into your bakery products and it operates and acts as you would expect a sugar. But it also has a very low glycemic level, which means that obviously it's great for people who have diabetes. And we know that diabetes is a problem that people are more and more experiencing as our lifestyles are affected by the things that we eat. Yeah.
Okay. We talked about sustainability before. Do you see the sustainability component more important in startup than in other corporations? And how do you see the innovation in this field?
Yeah, I mean, like sustainability, if we take it really back, it's about the use of land. So how are we using the land? And we actually have companies that are using some of the incredible space technology that's floating around us to enable us to manage our land better. You know, we can, from space, we can like measure the property of soil up to about 10 centimeters deep, so we can understand whether or not what is the drainage properties of land, whether or not it's properly irrigated. We can look at the plant leaves and see the colors to see where fertilization might be required. So rather than having a spread everywhere approach, we can be a little bit more targeted. And so some of this very innovative technology, some of the most cutting edge stuff, is actually being used for one of the oldest industries in the world, which is farming. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Maybe back to you guys. Is there any questions related to high-tech innovations that you see in the food industry, or any questions about startup innovations that you see? Any questions? See one on the back, yes?
Hello, my name is Olivier. You will see me later on the stage. But now, Craig, tell us a bit about your personal experience with startups, and where are you involved in this kind of startups, and what have you developed on your own, please?
Okay, thankfully, I have an answer to that. So the thing is that it's great to be in and around highly motivated entrepreneurs developing really great technologies. And it's kind of an infectious environment to be in. So of course, naturally, you feel an urge to sort of go out and see what you can do yourself. So I have a company. It's like my, if we use an Americanism, I would say it's my side hustle. And basically, we're building digital twins of humans. We're looking at their genetics, and because, of course, a lot of people are becoming more conscientious about their diets and thinking about what nutrients they need to have in their bodies. And so what we do is we take a saliva sample, we do an analysis of the DNA. We only look at around 700,000 SNPs. You're made up of billions, so don't worry, it's not all of you, but it's some of you. And what we do is we analyze the DNA, we look at maybe where they have a deficit or a risk of having a deficit in things like vitamin D. But we also look at other complications that may come along down the line. So that's what I do. That's my sort of side hustle and the thing that I like to do on the side. It's quite a busy life.
Okay, thanks, Craig. Let's maybe come back to the collaboration. So we see a lot of startups, we see big corporations being interested, but always being a bit afraid to invest in startups. What is the best way for you to collaborate between larger corporations and those startups?
Okay. I would say let's start with first principles. You need to understand in your own organizations where you are maybe struggling with something or having a challenge, and start to think about, okay, where does it make sense to collaborate with a startup? So that comes back in, and that could be in any aspect. It could be the technology that you're using, it could be whether or not you have a good profile of the data. And by the way, innovation doesn't necessarily have to interact in terms of the improvement of the product or the improvement of the process. It's also about, can innovation help you to track your sustainability score, for example? And that's something that's really important. So these are things that are getting harder and harder for, I would imagine, some bakeries to think about, but you're going to have to start thinking about them, because big companies, if you work with them, like supermarkets, they're going to be turning around to you one day and saying, okay, we need to know what is the carbon footprint of your baked goods, so that we can report on it ourselves and inform our customers what we're doing to become more sustainable. So innovation is actually permeating in all aspects of, I would say, the food industry.
Okay, very clear. how can larger companies identify those startups? Because you see it needs to match with some of the fields on technologies or on data, but how can we identify those people that could be interested to us?
So this is where it tends to get tricky, because some of these startups actually, they don't have big marketing budgets, so they're not necessarily as visible as you'd like to think. But what you can do is you can look at organizations. There are many sort of, I would say, accelerators, incubators, corporate ventures. I would say that there are also societies, groups, what we would call like clubs, you know, where entrepreneurs come together, because that's where they find together their support structures. And I think that just actually taking a little visit to those sorts of places is a great way to see what is actually happening in the innovative space. It's a great place to start up a conversation, and I think that that's really important. I didn't really quite finish the point that I was going to make before, which is like, how do you work with it? So yes, you need to know what the direction is, but you also need to understand, okay, how are you actually going to work with a startup? Are you going to invest time in working with the startup? Because it's not just a matter of saying, hey, listen, you're a startup, do stuff for me. Because very often the collaboration with a startup requires obviously time and resource from your side, either whether or not it's resource in terms of having somebody who actually dedicates some time, or an actual role that is in place to actually work with startups, or whether or not it's the providing of guaranteed customer, or just thinking about the data and access to the information that you have access to that can actually help startups be better. And this is something that doesn't come naturally to everyone, you know, sort of being very open. But that's kind of like a great way to think about how your relationship should be. It is a relationship at the end of the day.
Okay. If you're fine, Greg, I would also maybe like to share the example of Puratos, how we did it.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's something we are still in the discovery mode. So we started only 5 years ago. We made some mistakes. We have a few little success, but we are still on the learning curve about those ones. Gabriela mentioned it before. We decided to split our investments in startup compared to our business in Puratos. We didn't want to mix the two, and that's why we created this Sparkalis company. Why we did it? For a few reasons. The first one is that in large corporations, usually, you know it, you have a lot of process, a lot of reporting, a lot of those things, and we didn't want to kill the entrepreneurial spirit of those startups by getting them directly into Puratos. So that was the first element. Second element, we know that we invest in startups. The risk profile of those investments is extremely high. So you know that if you will invest in 5, 10 startups, maybe 2 or 3 will succeed. All the other ones, probably some of them will never materialize. And of course, we have also a few financial criteria to respect, to grow, to be profitable, which is not always matching with startups. So we decided also with our shareholders, let's really split the Puratos activities with those new startups so that we are not going to mix them. And the third element was about the time, the resource, and the investments. Puratos is really driving on the bakery, ingredients, confectionery, but sometimes it's also difficult to ask the people from Puratos to support basically those startups, and we decided to put 2-3 people dedicated to those startups in order to not avoid to mix them. Anyway, what is the link for us is that every startups we are investing need to have a link with the long-term strategy of Puratos. So we defined a few criteria that we really believe are important for the coming 10, 20, 30 years in the market. It's about precise fermentations, it's about sugar reductions, it's about food preservation. So we have defined 5-6 criteria, and we are only going to invest in startups if they fit with those criteria, because you can really go all around the world, but we really want that those ones fit. And one day we believe that that should bring basically added values to Puratos. It can take 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, probably not 10 years, they will die before, but at least it will take some years before they leverage. That's a bit the way we organize. We are not yet convinced it's the best way, also learning learning from those ones. It's really recent, but at least we make a trial on this.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you saw other example or if anybody saw other example into this field.
I have to say, I had the opportunity before, when I first arrived here, just to go have a look around, and I came across Gaetan, and he's basically doing some amazing stuff with GF Impact. He's got a standout there, and he would enable you to be able to track your sustainability scoring, and I think that this is a great example of a value alignment where Paratos has this commitment to sustainability, but is also backing it up with an investment into this company. It's great, and I would strongly advocate you, if you've never spoken to a startup, they don't bite. Have a go, you know, and have a conversation, and you might be amazed by actually how they can support you.
Okay. Maybe time for some questions. Any questions? Any comments? Yes, none? Yeah, please go.
So we are 34 years old.
Mhm.
We're not a startup,
Yeah.
for sure. How can a company with history on the back can be as agile and innovative as a startup? And regarding products, what is the best rhythm to innovate?
Okay, it's a very interesting one, so I have to be diplomatic. The profile of a startup and a larger organization are different. You have different attitudes to risk. You have different perspectives on the future and how far out you can look. You also tend to have more responsibilities, obviously, to stakeholders. Yes, exactly. And this is for the larger one, whilst with a startup, they have a different perspective on this. They can be more dynamic. And the reason why some of those larger companies are the way they are is because they've put in place structures in terms of management and all the different levels that enable them to take away some of the risks so that they become themselves an investment. Because obviously people want to support your organizations too. So I would agree that if you are a big company and you want to benefit from the agility of startups, buy their products. If you want to get more involved and help them to find a better solution for you, partner with those startups. And if you see an opportunity to bring in something that you want to keep for yourself, maybe, buy the startup. Other than that, you can do great things like by setting up vehicles, these venture wings, or venturepreneurship we call it, you know, where you create these organizations, but they have to have a different structure. The route to the management needs to be very short. Decisions have to be fast. And so they have to have a different character if you want to bring them into your organization. That's my take. Would you agree?
I agree. What I also like in startups, we try to be agile internally, but we still have our business model of corporations. And what I like in the startups I meet, it's completely out of the box and completely changing your own business model. I can give an example. We are very big in the chocolate industry. There is a lot of risk about availability of the cocoa beans related to the weather conditions. What we do as a business, we try to diversify the risk, looking to new countries, new way to work, and so on. We are meeting startups, they say, why do you still bother there? We are going to ferment cacao cell without starting from the tree. That's something internally we would never have go to this level, and it helps you to reflect sometimes a bit outside of the box. I don't say that all the ideas are good, but really it's shaking you a bit on your usual way of reflecting. That's really what we like. And of course you need to select and decide where to invest, but that's something quite interesting. So that's one, we identified these US startups, and Sparkle is invested €1 million now in these startups. Let's see in the future. We don't say that the future of chocolate is there, but I think it's interesting to learn further about this one. I think none of you had also questions?
Yeah, I had a question for Craig, actually.
No pressure.
I had a question for Craig, actually, based on your experience for having seen many startups, and of course we all know some succeed and some don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if I'm a small entrepreneur, what can I learn from the ones that succeed? And in your opinion, for the ones that didn't succeed, what's the difference between the two? Is it process? Is it technology? Is it route to market? Difficult question probably, but just curious to hear your answer.
Okay, so if I recall correctly, the number one reason why startups fail, and I think it's around 42% of the reason, the cause, is because they build something that nobody wants right now. So that can sometimes be the case that they're seeing the future so far, they develop a product, but the market isn't there for them yet. Right, so that's one of the big challenges that startups face. The other sort of things are around, financing. They run out of runway, so they need to have that. And of course, you're bringing in very often into a startup also different personalities and ideas and so you have to think a little bit about the relationships that happen, and sometimes team cohesion is not ideal. I mean, work with startups, but also, you're grown-up, mature companies, and I would say also do some due diligence. You want to make sure that, are they developing the technology themselves that you actually want to use? So this is something to consider as well. But in general, startup founders are a special breed because very often they are wildly passionate and highly innovative, and sometimes they put their heads in boxes and they work ferociously hard. And actually that's one of the jobs that I do, right? So my job as a senior innovation consultant is actually to help lift them up, make them see what the opportunities are. We talked a little bit about business modeling, so there's a lot of innovation that can be done, with just thinking about how you make money, and that's something that I like to work with them. So we try to take out some of those challenges, those risks as well out of the business. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
Yeah.
Maybe your last questions before we close up? Any final one? No? We are still there the whole day, so really don't hesitate to get to Craig or to myself. Thanks a lot for your attentions. And I think, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very insightful, and I remember from my discussions with Craig, different ideas about sugar reduction, because in Romania right now it's a hot topic about how to reduce sugar intake and how to create a pastry or a cake with less than 10% sugar and still be very delicious, to have the same taste, to have the same flavor, to have the same functionality. And I remember the startup that you gave me, and now it's on the table of headquarters, to get in contact with the partners you mentioned and start building the industry healthier and more sustainable.
Absolutely.
Bun, thank you very much. Aici ia loc finalul primei sesiuni. Ce urmează mai departe? Avem pauza de prânz, urmează să se deschidă ușile în 10 minuțele și în zona de marketplace. În zona de marketplace vor fi 3 zone dedicate. Avem partea de sustenabilitate, unde avem foarte multe rețete vegane, unde avem rețete cu mai puțin zahăr, rețete cu fructe locale, trasabilitate, la fel în partea de ciocolată. Avem partea de health and well-being, stare de bine și cum putem să îmbunătățim nutrițional rețetele pe care le avem. Și o ultimă secțiune cu inovații, atât în zona de patiserie, cofetărie, cât și brutărie. Iar la 3:30 vă așteptăm înapoi în sală pentru un panel de discuție despre fața nevăzută a antreprenoriatului din România, consultanți în legislație, consultanți în fiscalitate și speaker din rândul dumneavoastră. Mulțumim Ana Pan că s-a alăturat invitației noastre, mulțumim Cake Expert pentru acceptarea invitației, Lăptăria cu Caimac, la fel. Totodată mulțumim și partenerilor noștri pentru acest eveniment. Pentru pauza de hidratare, în zona de marketplace veți găsi un startup românesc, we have a new startup in the marketplace, se numesc Finaqua și fac filtrare de apă de la robinet, o transformă în 2 stadii de alcalinizare. Testați-o și cu siguranță va fi partenerul nostru de hidratare în această zi. Mulțumim Lăptăria cu Caimac pentru deliciile cu lactate, chiar dacă am vorbit foarte mult de vegan, avem foarte multe produse lactate, poate chiar și fără lactoză. Mulțumim dumneavoastră și totodată mulțumesc colegilor mei, chiar dacă nu sunt prezenți în această sală, dar fără ei nu am fi reușit să vă inspirăm. Colegii mei consilieri tehnici care au pregătit toate produsele în ultima săptămână s-a copt intens la noi în laborator. Mulțumim și Ciocli de Lis pentru toate deliciile din ciocolată pe care le veți degusta. Căutați pralina Dubai, nu o să regretați.